You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
This episode is brought to you by Palo Alto Networks, the leader in cybersecurity. As AI-driven attacks increase, organizations can't afford to have network security that's stuck in the past. Discover how Palo Alto Networks can help you predict what's coming and proactively secure against it with a zero-trust, AI-powered network security platform built to secure whatever, whenever, wherever. To learn more, visit paloaltonetworks.com/network security platform. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts tracking down threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems of protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
Stonefly it initially caught our eyes because in our view, it is probably the most interesting of the North Korean sponsored espionage groups.
That's Dick O'Brien. He's principal editor at Symantec. The research we're discussing today is titled Stonefly. North Korea-linked spying operation continues to hit high-value targets.
The start of the year is a great time to take that next step in your education, career, and beyond. Rely on N2K certification prep to provide the tools to help boost knowledge, skills, and confidence to get you there. And now, for a limited time, all N2K certification practice tests are 40% off. Visit n2k.com/certify and use promo code N2KVDAY. That's N2KVDAY to save 40% on your purchase. That's n2k.com/certify with promo code N2KVDAY. Offer ends Monday, February 19th. Happy learning.
And now a word from our sponsor, 6sense. 6sense provides award-winning cloud-based automated endpoint and vulnerability management solutions to streamline IT and security operations. With its advanced platform, businesses gain complete visibility and control over their infrastructure, reducing IT and security risks and optimizing operational efficiency. With 6sense, you'll get real-time alerts, risk-based vulnerability prioritization and remediations, and an intuitive automation and orchestration engine so you can focus on your core business goals, confident in the knowledge that your enterprise is secure, compliant, and running smoothly. Visit 6sense.com to learn why enterprises choose them.
So yeah, they're interesting for a few reasons. They've been around for a good while. I think they first appeared around 2009, and at the start they were like your what was at the time your prototypical North Korean sponsored group. So they were involved in sort of lots of noisy, not terribly sophisticated attacks. So they started out doing distributed denial of service attacks against targets in South Korea and the US. And, they kind of pop up every couple of years with DDoS attacks. Then they introduced a backdoor Trojan. They were obviously stealing some information. They were involved in some disk wiping attacks in, I think, 2013. But something interesting happened to them along the way. Sometime either in 2019 or probably sometime before that, they completely pivoted into something very, very different. And since that time, they have been focused on a very small number of espionage attacks, and they're very tightly focused on what we believe to be acquiring kind of a sensitive or classified or advanced intellectual property. So they seem to be like this really super focused specialist team who are just kind of going after this type of information. So every time we see a Stonefly attack, the victim is always really, really interesting.
What makes you believe that this is the same group that we'd seen previously, since 2009? If they updated their techniques and indeed headed in a different direction, are there things that point to it still being a continuation of the same group?
There's definitely a continuation in terms of the tool set used. So you can kind of, obviously the tools they use today have no resemblance to what the tools they started out with, but there is a kind of a daisy chain or an overlap of tools used all along the way. So these days, they use a custom backdoor Trojan that we call Preft. I think some other vendors call it D-Track or Veil4. And that's kind of from our perspective, the calling card, because they're the only group who use that particular backdoor. So yeah, we've been able to kind of follow them through the years, through overlapping of tool sets.
Yeah. Well, let's go through together this latest target that you all analyzed here in the research. Can you walk us through step by step? What exactly did you all witness?
What we came across, it was kind of an interesting attack from our perspective, because initially we thought it might be ransomware, because we were doing a ransomware investigation. That was another customer on completely different geographic investigation and a completely different geographic location. And we found a tool there that we thought was linked to the ransomware, and then we saw it on this particular organization, and we were giving them the heads up that there may be some ransomware actors on their network. And then it turned out that the tool wasn't linked to the ransomware attackers at all, that it was actually a Stonefly tool. So then, of course, we spun up our investigation on it, and what we found was a long-term intrusion against this organization.
Well, let's go through it, step by step. But when you all initially started the investigation, what sort of things caught your eye?
The means of entry was interesting enough. We believe it was exploitation of the Log4j vulnerability, which I guess most people will be familiar with. It really hit the news back in December. I say we believe. That's because an exploit was run for this vulnerability against a VMware View server that was publicly facing. And the exploit ran, and then within 24 hours, I think it was 17 hours, we saw our first evidence of what was definitely Stonefly activity on the computer. So given the time frame there, it seems that this was their way into the network. So they got onto this server, and they did a lot of groundwork, I guess, in terms of establishing persistent presence. So they put the back door there. They got some communications back to their command and control server. There was evidence of them dumping credentials and things like that. And then once they kind of got all the information that they needed, they began moving laterally across the network. I think it was about 18 computers in total that they got onto. So, a good opportunity for them to kind of look around and see if they can find anything interesting.
Let's talk about that Preft backdoor itself. You all pointed out that it seemed to be that they'd updated it in this particular campaign.
Yeah. And this is not uncommon for an actor like Stonefly. They'll continuously develop their malware. At the very least, they'll adopt different obfuscation techniques to try and avoid triggering any security alerts. And in this case, they added a couple of additional bits of functionality. And I think it was an ability in this case to support a wider range of plugins. So I think the previous versions we'd seen could only handle 2 different types of plugins, and this one could handle 4: executable, BBS, batch files, and shellcode.
Well, walk me through exactly, sort of step by step, what Preft does when it kicks into action.
It is. It's essentially it's a backdoor Trojan. So you have a persistent presence on the victim's machine. So it does have the kind of functionality that allows you to perform certain actions on the computer, take information, and identify it for exfiltration.
And so, was there any sense for exactly what they were after here? Was there any, pattern in the types of things they seem to be interested in exfiltrating?
What I would say is that I'd say this company, I can't say too much about them, but they're a very specialized engineering company. So they work in the energy sector, particularly energy offshore type of energy extraction, and they also work with the military. So presumably they're kind of looking for information about, how they do things or how they work, with the potential to kind of leverage that intellectual property in whatever they wanted to do themselves.
You mentioned at the outset that the sort of historically North Korea kind of came on the scene and had a reputation for being noisy and not especially nuanced. Where do they stand today? How do they rate on the global stage?
It's an interesting country to look at from an espionage perspective. I guess, first of all, the whole North Korean cyber espionage scene, it's quite opaque. As espionage tends to be, you don't know about every country's espionage operations in detail, but in North Korea, it's particularly so. So we have very little visibility or insights into the overall structure of it, And indeed, lots of people just tend to refer to North Korean espionage operations under just one umbrella name, which is Lazarus. And then the US government call it Hidden Cobra. But we've seen several kind of distinct patterns of activity, which suggests that there are at least several distinct teams operating there. So how do they're unusual too in that they carry out a lot of financially motivated attacks, which isn't really within the remit of other countries' intelligence services. Anytime you do see it happening with other state-sponsored actors, we usually suspect it's some contractor doing it, earning some money on the side. But with North Korea, it's definitely part of their core goals is to acquire foreign currency. So we've seen them do everything from kind of stealing multi-million-dollar amounts from banks. We've seen them being involved in ATM type fraud. They're quite interested in cryptocurrencies and that sort of thing, So I think the regime there sees it as one way of getting foreign currency. So that's quite unusual. But yeah, there are some teams that are very specialized that would be kind of, would be comparable to other state-sponsored actors in this front. So there's an ongoing campaign called Operation Dream Job, which tends to target different industry sectors at a time, usually probably in pursuit of technology or intellectual property. And that would be up there with kind of most second-tier nation-state-sponsored espionage actors. And then there's people like Stonefly who seem to be super focused on a very small number of selective targets.
Can you give us some insights into what happens with an incident like this when it comes to incident response? I mean, something like this gets discovered. How do you kick into action here? What sort of things go into play?
For us ourselves, I guess it usually starts with a little bit of fragmentary evidence. We uncover one tool or something the attacker does, generates an alert, and we follow it up. And then it's really kind of a case of following the breadcrumbs, trying to figure out where this tool came from, what was used to install it, and then and really trying to trace the attack back to the origin and then forward to the ultimate payload and map it out in that way. And then once we kind of have a reasonably good understanding of what we're dealing with, we'd often, obviously, we'd update our product to, make sure it doesn't happen again. But we'd also notify the customer, which can be anything from an email to maybe a phone call or something like that, to explain what we discovered on their network and the significance of this. It's in the case of something like Stonefly, all right, we would we'd make an effort to have a conversation with them about it.
Right. I suppose if you're on Stonefly's radar, it is undoubtedly a serious situation for you.
Yeah, it is because a lot of their targets are dealing with highly classified stuff. And everything they go after tends to have like either a civilian or military application. So I think any organization that has been targeted by Stonefly would want to know about it and would be very worried about what they're trying to get, going by what we've seen from their attacks.
So what are your recommendations then in terms of organizations protecting themselves? What are your words of wisdom there?
The words of wisdom, for Stonefly, the words of wisdom are as they would apply for any espionage operation, which is to kind of, educate yourself about how these attacks typically unfold, and then try and implement, I guess, a multi-layered approach to your security so that you don't really have any single point of failure. In this case, the means of access appeared to be Log4j. So that server was unpatched for some reason. Obviously we don't know why. Organizations have different patching policies and what have you. But it does go to show the importance of patching vulnerabilities in as timely a manner as you can, especially on public-facing servers, because if that wasn't there, the attackers may have found it much harder to get in, if not impossible.
Our thanks to Dick O'Brien from Symantec for joining us. The research is titled Stonefly. North Korea-linked spying operation continues to hit high-value targets.
And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, session hijacking, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, session cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific exposed data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation that fits seamlessly into existing incident response frameworks. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show.
The Cyberwire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing Cyberwire team is Rachel Gelfand, Liz Irvin, Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karpf, Eliana White, Peru Prakash, Justin Sabi, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week.